Okay, so yesterday we got up to the two dots. We're about halfway down, just the beginning of the wide lines on Daf Chaf Hey Amud Bet, Mesechet Beit Tzah. So we saw this line from the Mishnah that said, Shachta b'sadeh lo yaviena b'mot. We saw the Mishnah said that if you kill the animal in the field, you shouldn't come along carrying the whole animal along on a pole. This is going to be a sort of a zilzul in Yom Tov. So the Gemara over here talks about other things, which might be a zilzul. It might be what we consider uvdin dachol, but it's not fitting for Yom Tov. So it says like this. It says Tana Rabbanan, right? It says Ein asuma yotze b'maklo v'lo ha'oeh b'talmilo ve'ein yotzin b'kisei echad. Ve'ein yotzin b'kisei echad ha'ish ve'echad ha'isha. So a suma, a blind person, should not go out with his stick. Okay, the kavanah over here is to be somebody he can walk without it. I think if he can't go without it, then that would be different. But it says he can go without it. And Rashi says, "Have derechol ve'ikaziluta de yom tov." Sort of, walking along with these accessories. This would be a derechol, and it's not proper for yom tov. So ena suma yotzei b'maklo lo al betalmilo. The shepherd should not go out with his bag on his back. Ve'ein yotzin b'kisei. We don't go out on the kisei. So apparently, the minhag was in those days that important people wouldn't walk around, but they would carry them around on a chair. Okay, that was the minhag. Says Rashi over here, "Shetoanin otam bnei adam v'myoshvim b'katedra." They would sit and they would carry them on this chair. So it says whether it's a man or a woman, that is not allowed on Yom Tov. Again, obviously, it's not an issue here of carrying. If we were dealing with Shabbat, so then we'd have an issue of carrying if you're outside the Eruv. But on Yom Tov, we don't have a problem of Hotza'ah. But the issue here is that it says Zilzul. This is Derech Chol. Okay, so now we're going to focus on this last one. Again, we're on Daf Chaf Hey Amud Bet. We're just at the beginning of the wide lines. We're going to focus on this case of Ein Yotzin B'Kisei. That's what the Braita said. And now the Gemara says, Eini. It says, is that really true? Because we're going to bring a number of stories where people were carried out on chairs on Yom Tov. We see this seemingly is permissible. V'ashalach Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi said the following. He said, Zaken echad haya b'shchonatenu. There was an elderly person in our Zaken, in our neighborhood. V'ya yotzei b'glutki shelo. They would carry him out on a glutki. What is a glutki? A glutki is a type of a chair. It's interesting. You look at Rashi. Rashi translates that into Old French. It says pel dai stool, which sounds a little bit like pedestal, right, in modern English. So they would carry him out on a pedestal. That was but the point is that they would do that. So you just told me that you can't, and now the Gemara says that you can. So what is it? Can you carry out people on their pedestals on Yom Tov or not? So it says Ba'al v'shalut Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. They came to ask Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, and this is what he said: Amar ima bin tzachim lo mutar. He said if the masses need him, right? They need him to come to the Beit HaMidrash. He needs to come give the drasha. He needs to come give the shiur. Then they can carry him out on the chair. Okay, it's not clear to me exactly what this means. This was just done I think it was just done out of kavod, meaning I don't think you're talking about in case a person's unable to walk. But that was the kavod, that was the way they would do it. And if they need that as part of they need that for the drasha, they're allowed to carry him out on Yom Tov. We don't say that is derech chol. But if it's not the case of Rabbi Tzachim lo, then it would not be allowed. V'samchu Rabbeinu divrei Achi Shakya, the Amar, that's his name. He says, Ana afiktei leRav Huna meheini leshile umishile leheini. Okay, Shile and Heini are names of places over here. Rashi says, meheini leshile. He says, mekomot smuchin ve'en tchum Shabbat b'nehem. These are very close places. There's no problem here of crossing the tchum. But he says, I would go and I would carry out Rav Huna on his way to the Beit Midrash. We would carry him from one place to the other. V'amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Ana afiktei leMar Shmuel. He says, I would carry Mar Shmuel on the chair as well. Mishimsha latula, mitula lashimsha. From the sun to the shade, and from the shade to the sun. Okay. So hatam kidamatam ayu rabim tzachim lo. Yes, because over there the reason was
the smart AI assistant that will help you with any task. It is ideal for.
Okay. We said the reason was If the master, if it needed for this in the public interest, right? That would be mutar. So Malay Rav Nachman Nechama Bar Ada Shliach Tzion. So Chama Bar Ada, it's a very interesting name. It says that was his name, Chama Bar Ada, says Rashi. And he was called Shliach Tzion. It was a Shaliach, not a Shaliach Chabad, not a Shaliach Mizrahi, but it was a Shliach Tzion. That means, so Rashi, Ragil Ayala Lot Yerushalayim. He would go many times. He'd go to Yerushalayim. So they said to him, Kisalak lahatam, akif vazil asulama ditzur. He says, don't take the quick route. When you go, the next time you go, take this path, go via the sulama ditzur, through the mountains of Tzur. Okay? Says Rashi Aviyah Akif. He says, Harbe b'shvili et haderech, go the longer way, lehakif ha, to go around the mountain, v'lech derech sulam malot hal shel Tzur, go up via the mountain of Tzur. Why? Shesham Yoshev Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi. That is where Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi lives. He says, so he's telling him, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi. So again, Amar Rav Nachman Acham Bar Ada. Rav Nachman says to Chama Bar Ada, the next time you go to Eretz Yisrael, go via Tzur, so that you can go and visit Rav Yaakov Bar Idi. And you have to ask him this question, right? This is in the days before you could just send a WhatsApp or an SMS to the Rav. You have to go in person and find out what he says. So what's this pressing question he has to ask? He says, "Ba'y mine, go and ask him, Kisei ma'atun bei. What do you say about a kisei? What do you say about this halakha of whether you can carry somebody out in a chair on Yom Tov? Go and ask Rav Yaakov Bar Idi." So when he went, what's the problem? Rav Yaakov Bar Idi had already passed away, and he was not able to ask him the shaila. Kisalek Ashacheli Rabbi Zerika. Okay, so he found Rabbi Zerika. So we asked him instead. What do you say about the chair? Can you go? Can you carry people out on the kisei on Yom Tov? Amale Hachi Amal Rabbi Ami. This is what Rabbi Ami said. He said, "Ubilvad shelo yikatef." Okay, so we had another condition here. So originally we said you cannot carry somebody out on the chair on Yom Tov. Then we saw the Ma'aseh that said you can, and we said no. That is dealing with a case whereby Rabim Tzrachim Lo. Rabim Tzrachim Lo is different, and therefore you're allowed to go and you're allowed to carry him out. Okay, great. Then we say, for whatever reason, that answer doesn't seem to be sufficient. They wanted to go and ask in Eretz Yisrael what they said. So he went and he asked Rabbi Zerika, and he said, not only, it doesn't say this explicitly, but that seems to be implied that it's adding on. Not only do we say we're Rabim Tzrachim Lo, but you can carry him out, but only if it's done in a way, shelo yikatef. You carry with your hands and not lekatef. It's something to do with the shoulder. So what exactly does that mean? My bilvad shelo yikatef. Amar Rav Yosef Breder Rava ba'alunki. Okay, this is a certain way of carrying. So what does that mean? Says Rashi over here, alunki. Okay, we'll skip the French. He says, "Shenoten zro'o al katef chavelo." You place your arm on the shoulder of your friend, v'chavelo ktefo, and he puts his arm on your shoulder. V'zeh bekis'o yoshev al zrotehem. In other words, rather than each person carrying it themselves, they link arms, and then the chair goes in between the arms. I guess it's a more sturdy way of carrying. Now he says the mitchazei derechol uparhesia lo lich lemakom rachok. This is the way of chol. This is why would you do like this? Because this is the way you would do in order to carry further. Lemakom rachok tfei mishlosim ben yedehem bekis'o. If you're just carrying with your hands, so you can do it to a much shorter time. But if you're doing it through with this katef, right, with the shoulders and the arms, so then that's done for a longer journey, and that seems more like derechol, and therefore that would not be allowed. So now says the Gemara, hang on a second. Ini, is that really correct? Again, similar to what we asked before. V'harav Nachman shala leyalta lemepik a'alunki. So Rav Nachman actually allowed for Yalta to be carried out in this way. Who was Yalta? Says the Gemara. Says Rashi Shem Ishtosh Rav Nachman. That was his wife's name. So he allowed for her to be carried out on the chair in this way, where they would do it with the arms. So says the Gemara, Shani Yalta de Ba'ita. Says, no, that's different because she was scared. She was scared about falling, I guess, about falling off the chair. Now remember, I don't know if they still do this, but it used to be all the bar mitzvahs and weddings, whatever. You take people and lift them up on a chair, or you lift them up on a table. I remember at our wedding, they do 1 round of dancing. All these yeshiva bachrim are around. They thought it'd be very, very fun. They somehow get us into the middle of the circle, and they had us sitting on a table, and they lift up the table. We still have a photo of our wedding album. You can see me sitting there on the table, and you can see my wife, and it's very, very scared. Look at our faces. Okay, people get scared when they get lifted up. I'll tell you something else they did to me, which I still to this day don't know how they managed to do it. But if you've ever seen this, where they take a tablecloth and they take they all hold the tablecloth and they throw the chatan up on the tablecloth. So they asked me before if they could do it, and I said no. Somehow they cornered me and they got me they threw me onto the tablecloth, and I was so scared. I was holding with my hands onto the tablecloth. And they're parachuting me up into the air. But it's meant to be that you get parachute, you go up and you come on the cloth, the whatever. But I was too scared to let go, so I was holding up. So you can see in the photos, hands here in the front, and I was went almost vertical. Could have ended very, very badly. Baruch Hashem, all was okay. And we've got the doctor's nodding his head. It could have ended very badly, but Baruch Hashem. So in any event, you have to be careful when you lift people up and start throwing people up into the air. Not so safe. So yeah, they say this method of carrying the chair. Again, I don't know exactly how big the chair is, how it looked, whatever. But this way of carrying the chair with the shoulders, they say you can't do that. They say they could do that for Yalta because she was scared. Okay, the person was scared. It's a more sturdy method, so that takes precedence over the fact that it's maybe uvdindachol. Okay. Ameimar Marzutra mikatvelu b'shabta deragla. Says Ameimar Marzutra also they would carry them this way. Okay, on the shabta deragla. I'll talk about what that is in a moment. So also it said mishum biatuta. They were also scared. And there are those who say not because they were scared, but because of dochak atzibur, meaning that everybody came and everybody's standing there and everybody wants to see them as they come in. So they do it in such a way that it's quicker, so that you don't have to have the masses standing out for a long time. Rashi just says over here, he says mishum be'atuta tzibura shayu niv'atim min atzibur amdim al ragleihem mipneihem v'yuleim lipol. Right, they were passing through, and there were these huge crowds around them. You know what it's like when the rabbis come out, when the gdolim come out through the streets, right? So there was a huge crowd around them, and they were scared that they were going to fall over. Or mishum duchka shomdim al ragleihem, that people are standing on their feet. V'torach tzibur, this is a bother on the tzibur. Hilkach mekatvelu avdehem v'talmidahem u'molichin otan maher limkomam. Therefore, they do it in this way so that it's much quicker. Okay, what is Shabta deragla? Shabta deragla means literally Shabbat haregel. This does not mean on Shabbat Chol HaMoed, but it means on the Shabbat before the regel, when they would go and they would have to remember all of this is because they need to go and give the drasha. So the minhag is, nowadays we still have Shabbat HaGadol and Shabbat Shuvah, those drashot. But really, the Gemara says that Shloshim Yom Lifnei HaChag, Sholim Doshim B'ilchot HaChag, 30 days before the regel. So this was presumably one of those Shabbatot when they would go and they would have to doresh. Rashi just says one word, right? He says b'shabta deragla. He says shedol shin. Okay. One other point which is interesting is that we said all of this whole thing started off. We had a breita telling us that things which are zilzul yom tov you cannot do, and one of those things was carrying people out on chairs. We said it's zilzul yom tov, it's derech chol. But then we said that im rabim tzruchim lo, if the masses need them, then you can go along and carry them on the chair, okay? And then we saw with the discussion about Katef, so it said that Yelta was Rav Nachman's wife, she was carried out like this. So Tosfot asked a question over here. He says, Shani Yelta deveita. He says, Vim Tomar, V'alo itilu ela ki yesh batzorech rabim. The only reason they allowed to go and to carry people out on the chairs is because there's a tzorech rabim for them to go out. Kedamrin allow. So what is a tzorech rabim? Yalta is not giving the drashat Shabbat HaGadol, right? V'yesh lomar, dil manami halcha letzorech rabim. Maybe also they needed her. There was a public need for her to go out. Shebat Rosh HaGolah Aita, she was the daughter of the Rosh HaGolah, and ayu rabim tzachim mimena. And people needed many things. Not that she was giving the drasha, but that they needed her for whatever reason. Okay. So now we get to the next Mishnah, okay, and dealing with We'll be dealing with some of the halachot of shechita and some of the halachot of animals on Yom Tov. So again, here we have a discussion about an animal. Again, the last Mishnah spoke about Beimah Mesukenet. Here we're talking about an animal that you might not necessarily be able to shecht, which is a bechor. The din is when you have a bechor, any firstborn animal, so the bechor has to go to the Kohen. The bechor has to go to the Kohen and has to be brought to the Beit HaMikdash and has to be brought as a korban. That is the case when the bechor is a tam, if it has no mum, if it has no blemish. However, if a bechor has a mum, then you're allowed to shecht it anyway and you're allowed to eat it. That is if it has a mum kavua, a fixed mum. But if it has a mum over, then it's not. So how do you know? How do you know if a mum, the blemish, is a mum kavua or a mum over? How do you know? You have to go and ask somebody. Who do you go and ask? Somebody go and ask the rabbi. No, you have to go and ask the shepherd. You have to find somebody who's an expert in animals, who understands what is a mum kavua and what is a mum over. Ideally, a rabbi who's a shepherd. That's a thing. I always say there's a Gemara, but I think it's the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Didn't look it up right now, but I don't remember which Amora it is. I think it's Rav, but it's one of the Amorim, and it says how he says he went to go and to live with a shepherd for many years, to go and do shimush, to go and learn what is a mum kavod mum. I always bring that Gemara. Always, we have these cases, questions of medical ethics or questions of technology and all sorts of things. And you often have these intricate halachic discussions. If you don't know what the metziut is, if you don't know what the reality is on the ground, you don't know how the technology works, you don't know how the medicine works, so then it's or what the medicine is, so then it's very, very hard, if impossible, to be able to give a psak. Halakha is always connected to reality. We have to understand. Okay, there's a question about what level of resolution you have to go into, right? Lo nitna Torah lemalachei hasharet. So this is very interesting. And a lot of the new questions on technology, electricity on Shabbat, for instance. So there's a big machloket between two schools of thought. There are, if you look in some of the journals in recent years, where there have been many articles published about magnetic key cards and internet and on Shabbat and all sorts of things. So there are some Rabbanim who will write. There's actually a couple of Rabbanim who are also scientists themselves, and they'll write articles. I remember I saw one, somebody wrote an article, and he had about a 2-page explanation as to how the technology works and all the microscopic things and the processes that are taking place. And then somebody wrote back a response, and he said, the first 2 pages of your article, your scientific description is all very interesting, and it's all very accurate, but it's completely irrelevant. Meaning, everybody agrees that the description is relevant, but it's relevant at the level of what the eyes see and what we see in human senses. If you're talking about things that happen microscopically, you're talking about things that you'd only know in a lab, so it's not clear that that's necessarily relevant, right? For this particular example, right? When it comes to an electric circuit, so there's an argument to say that when you have a magnetic key card, right, there's always a current and there's always a circuit that's flowing, and you're not actually causing any change. You're not creating any new circuit when you bring the key card. Okay, it's a minority opinion that says like that. That's the opinion that says we delve deep into the scientific process in order to answer. And the other opinion, which is probably more common, says, look, all I can see is that the door can't open. When I bring the card through, I'm causing an electric result, which opens the door. Okay, therefore I'm causing the electricity. Right, and then it's more complicated than that. I'm oversimplifying, but the point is, so to what resolution we go, that's a question. But the point is, certainly you have to know what's happening. You have to know what the reality is. So it comes to Bechor, and we have this in agricultural laws. We have this in every area of halacha. So when it comes to Bechor, you need to know what is you need an expert who can look at it and tell me if this is a mum kavua and this is a mum oveh. And the point is this: that if it has a mum which is a mum kavua, then the Bechor can be shechted, then it can be eaten anywhere. Then it would not be muktzah on Yom Tov. But if the Bechor has to come and has to be brought as a korban, so on Yom Tov it's going to be muktzah. Okay, that's the background. So now we can understand our Mishnah. Our Mishnah deals with a Bechor shenafal lebo. We have in Masechet Shabbat as well. What do you do if an animal falls into a pit? On the one hand, the animal's muktzah. On the other hand, we have the issue of tzar balei chayim. Okay, and the Gemara over there discusses. But yes, it says the Mishnah, Bechor shenafal lebo. We have a Bechor, a firstborn animal, again, a Bechor of a B'amat Torah, and the point is that you can't eat it. Rashi says, Bechor shenafal lebo, it fell into a pit. Bechor, bizman hazeh nishchat b'lo mum, mivnei shekodshim. Right, nowadays, and again, we don't have this issue with other korbanot, because other korbanot we simply don't dedicate. Every other korban How does an animal become a korban? Somebody makes a neder or somebody makes an endava. I take the sheep and I designate it and I say harezo ola. Or I say harezo whatever it is. I say this is going to be a korban. Nowadays we don't do that. We're very careful not to do that because if an animal is hekdesh, then there's nothing we can do with it. That's why we spoke about this before Pesach. If a person goes, it's brought in the Mishnah Berurah, a person goes shopping for Pesach, right? You go to buy meat. So you should be very careful. You shouldn't say, this meat is for Pesach. Because what does it mean, this meat is for Pesach? It means this meat is for the Korban Pesach. You can't dedicate. So you can say, this meat is for Chag, this meat is for Yontav, this meat is for the Seder night meal. But if you said it's for Pesach, we understand that you didn't actually mean to dedicate it as a Korban, you meant for the Chag, and it's okay, but Lekatchila you shouldn't. All right. That is with every other Korban. When it comes to Bechor, Bechor is the only type. It's an animal. It's Kedusha. It's not dependent on the fact that I dedicated. The fact that it's a firstborn means that it's hekdesh. So that's why we have a problem nowadays. So Rashi says, Bechor shenafal labo, Bechor bizman hazeh. Ein nishchat belo mum. I cannot shecht a Bechor if it doesn't have a mum. Mipnei shekodshemu, because it's kodshim. I can't be, there's an issur lishchot kodshim b'chutz. Deme'elavu kadosh. Right? Meaning it's kadosh by itself. It doesn't need to be designated. And somebody is going to shecht it. If it's a bachor tam, it does not have a mum. That is shechting kodshim bachutz, and that is liable for karet. So it's very, very severe. So our case is we have a bachor shenafal lebor. Okay, and again it fell into the pit, and we're worried yarepin yamut sham. We're worried that it's going to die. So he says, so we have a machloket in the Mishnah, what can we do? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yered Mumche, V'yireh. Im yesh bo mum ya'aleh v'yishchot, v'im lav lo yishchot. Again, the point is, we're worried if the Bechor has a mum, so then it's a good animal, and we want to be able to. It's ironic, right? But we're saying that if we want it to have a mum, because if it has a mum, then we can go and then it can't be a korban, and then we can shecht it, and then we can eat it. Again, it's going to be very, very expensive if the animal just go to waste. So Rabbi Yehuda says, what do? So you can't bring the animal out of the pit because it might be muktzeh. But he says, but the mumche, the experts who can go and who can check if it's a mum kavo over, he can go down into the pit, right? Rabbi Yehuda mer mum yared mumche can go down v'yil'eh im yesh bo mum. If it has a mum, so then you can bring it up and you can shecht it. V'imlav, if it doesn't, so lo yishchot. Well, then you can't. So that is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Shimon omer, kol she'en mumoni kami bod yom, enter min hamuchan. Okay. Rabbi Shimon says, remember, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon have a machloket right about muktzeh. Okay, we're going to see how this exactly what their machloket here is. If it relates to muktzeh, or relates to something else. But Rabbi Shimon says, Kol she'ein mumoni kami bod yom. He says that's not good enough. You can't now go and decide whether it's muktzeh or not. He says if the mum was not recognizable from before Yom Tov, okay, if before Yom Tov you saw this animal had a mum, so then in your mind you designated this bechor that you might shecht it on Yom Tov, it's not going to be muktzeh. But if you didn't know, so you assume that it's a bechor, nobody removed it from the state, there's nobody designated it for use on Yom Tov, and therefore enzem and muchan. Therefore, it's still going to be muktzeh. Okay. So Rabbi Shimon says it's no use. You can't now go along and say oh well, it's got a mum, so it's not going to be muktzeh. It's too late for that. Okay, so let's see Rashi. Rashi just says at the bottom of Amud Bet, he says mumche baki b'mumin. He explains us who is this mumche. Somebody who's an expert in mumin, in blemishes, lavchin by mum kavol and mum over, to tell the difference between mum kavol and mum over. So Rashi at the top of Daf Chavav Amud Aleph says im yesh bo mum. Right, that was Rabbi Yehuda. Al kochach Rabbi Yehuda muktzeh itlei ubemum anofel bo beyom tov lo shari delav datei alav metmor. Okay, we have to say like this: Rabbi Yehuda has muktzeh. Right, Rabbi Yehuda holds that there is such concept of muktzeh, and if we're dealing with a mum that the mum came along on Yom Tov, so that's not going to help. The whole point is it has to be designated from beforehand. So the point we're saying we don't know if it was or not. But if the mum came along on Yom Tov, that's already too late. So he says Hachikama. This is what he means to say. Ba'al mum שלא יראו לחכמים בעוד יום להתירו, ונפל בו ביום טוב. So, says Rashi, this is what case of Rabbi Yehuda is talking about in the Mishnah. We have a Bechor that is a Baal Mum. You know that it has a Mum. Already before Yom Tov, you know it has a Mum. But you didn't show it to the Chacham yet. Okay? So now, on Yom Tov, it fell into the bore. So, B'Yom Tov, Yered Mumche, V'Yireh Mum. Shaya B'ot Mum. So now the Mumche can go and see the Shaila that we had already from yesterday. In other words, already from yesterday, from before Yom Tov, you already had in mind, you already designated that you're going to potentially shecht it. You don't know, you have a safek, because if it is the mum kavor aver, you have to go and ask the Rav Shaila, the Seder. But that's from before. If there was no Shaila at all, right, it was a mum tam, as far as you know, and now on Yom Tov, you see the mum, okay, well, that's too late. Now, Rabbi Shimon says no. Rabbi Shimon says, Kol she'en mumoni kam vod yom. Enzem anamucham. It says Rashi, enzem anamucham. So he says, Laf mishum muktzah sarlei. Ta'leit lei muktzah. Again, Rabbi Shimon, again, I'm machloket Rat Shas, whether we have muktzah or don't have muktzah. So Rabbi Yehuda is always one who's machmir about muktzah, and Rabbi Shimon is one who's mekel. That's why Rashi is giving us a whole explanation, because it seems counterintuitive what the Mishnah is saying. But he says Rabbi Shimon is not, it's not because of muktzah. אלא לפי שמתירו ביום טוב, נראה כמתקנו. דאבה לקט, אין דין. He says, no. He says, the issue is, what does he mean when he says, אין זה מן המוכן? It's confusing. But he says, אין זה מן המוכן means that it's not ready. Meaning, if you're going to go now and you're going to give a psak, that it has a mum kavua, and now you're allowed to shecht it, so that's if you are metaken, that's if you are fixing it, you're establishing it you're making it ready on Yom Tov, and that is going to be a so it's going to be in a Sod Rabbanan. It's like if you have a din, which you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov, the gazu bei mishum shvut, v'achikama, that's what it means to say, ein hatarato heter, ve'eino muchan le'echsher. Saying, the point is, you're not, eino muchan le'echsher. You can't go and make it kasher. You can't go and make it mutar. Not because of muktzah, as we might have thought, the other Rishonim might explain, but because the act of making it mutar on Yom Tov, that's going to be problematic, according to Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so we'll stop the Adkan. We will stop there. We'll pick it up not next week. We'll pick it up from the Gemara. So again, just a reminder, next week there is no shiur. Wednesday is Yom HaZikaron and Thursday is Yom HaTzmut, so there will not be a shiur. The following week, there will be a shiur on Wednesday. But I'll remind you. And then on Thursday, there won't be because I'll be away. Okay, have a good day, everyone.
Toda. Yom Tov.
תודה רבה.